College Football Playoff Committee. John Swofford, who is the Commissioner of the ACC, and Greg Sankey, the SEC. We'll talk for a couple of minutes. We certainly want to include your questions as well, but considering where we are at the college football playoff, I thought we would start with a question and a status report in spite of all the noise and all the people in my business field who think that there ought to be a redo after the games are over, and they all seem to know who should have been in and who shouldn't. I'm curious, now that we've gotten through the semifinals, your thoughts on, did we get the right four teams in?
Yeah, once again, the selection committee got the right four teams in the playoff. There will always be a team five, and that team five will always be disappointed. But the fact is, we got the right four teams for the third year in a row. And obviously for the second year in a row, 1 and 2 seeds made it to the championship game. We're just delighted with the success of the playoff. The first 3 years have been awesome. We had high expectations going in, and frankly, we exceeded those. So we're just delighted with the way this thing's been going.
Commissioner Swofford and Commissioner Sankey, I would like to get your thoughts just on all the chat around there. Or is it, I know how Bill feels, we talk all the time, but as commissioners of the two schools, the championship game the last 2 years, is this the right number?
Well, I think it is at this given point in time. I think if you look back over the history of how this evolved and what our presidents who ultimately make that call were comfortable with, there are two bookends. One was the second semester and not wanting to go deeper into the academic year in the second semester with the championship game, and the other was the front end in early December when so many exams take place. And with those being the big bookends, 4 was a number that really fit for us. And, you know, personally, I think that given the first 3 years of this, I don't know that I've ever seen a startup, and I call the football playoff a startup, if you will, that has come out of the chute more successfully. So I think we're at the right number. If we went more, you'd have to deal with those same two bookends. And, you know, that's doable if you really wanted to do it. But I don't think there's any desire to do that with the decision makers that are in the room right now.
I think, Paul, that John has captured the history well. And when you look at what's happened over those 3 years, we make the media's job easy in November with Tuesday committee conversation, and you can criticize their rankings or their rankings, yet it builds the interest in college football. And there were a set of principles identified when the playoff of 4 teams was adopted, and I don't think those principles have changed. Now, as we continue and grow and learn, perhaps that's a piece of the conversation, but as John said, those principles are pretty clear, and the bookends he identified were a piece of that, and forwards really well as we see over the last 3 years.
Bill, going back to what I alluded to a minute ago, I've heard several people this week say that just for the sake of argument, Penn State should have been in, and it may create issues for a non-conference champion. I think we all know where this is coming from because of Ohio State's performance against Clemson. But do you, being in that room every week, do you think all of that really matters when you reset and you reboot next year and start all over again?
I really don't, Paul. You have to be careful when you evaluate and not take a long-term view of what happened in bowl games every year. We all know that there are different circumstances for different teams in bowl games, but Ohio State ran into a buzzsaw in Clemson. The committee felt strongly that Ohio State was one of the best 4 teams. Conference championships is one of the criteria, but only one. And when the committee looked at the whole body of work for Ohio State, they were confident that they were one of the best 4 teams, regardless of whether they were a conference champion or not. The Big Ten presented an interesting situation when you had a 3-way between Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan, each one having defeated the other one. So then you have to look at how did those games go among those three, and then look at how the three teams did outside of those three. And the committee just felt very confident that Ohio State was indeed one of the best four.
Like this to Commissioner Swafford and Sankey, Commissioner Sankey, because both of your conferences have been represented every year, but others have not, and so it's hard to ask how you would feel. You don't want to think about it, but I mean, there is a lot of conversation out there about some conferences getting left out, and I know that these are broad questions, but I would like, from a conference standpoint, address the fact that everyone does not get in.
I've thought about it, so I'll just be transparent. I don't know, John, if you've thought about it. I thought about it a great deal last year. It was my first year as commissioner, and the conference had had 10 years of teams involved in the national champion conversation. So I would lay awake at night, probably sweating, thinking about not having a team. And we are in positions where our teams have had the access. And if from the Southeastern Conference we were involved, I think that would likely introduce a conversation that's different. But we go back to the principles that brought together the 4-team playoff and ask if those have changed. I'm not sure they would have, other than the pain for that year, which I think will be enormous. So my hope is we'll continue to be successful and have those opportunities. I think there's some lessons from other postseason events, the NCAA men's basketball tournament, even what's being played now in the football championship subdivision. I was commissioner at that level. There were 16 teams at that time. Now that was 15 years ago. Now it's 24. It went from 16 to 20 and 24, and we've seen the NCAA men's basketball tournament continually grow to where we're now at 68. Team 69 is not happy. Team 70 is not happy. And so we could go to 8. Not that we are. And the first question you'll have after you're at 8 is, well, when are you going to go to 16? And that's why when I speak of this issue, I speak of the principles that caused the 14 playoff to be established, that despite the competitive interest, but let's focus on those principles that make decisions that flow out of that, which would suggest we'll stay at 4 for a significant period of time.
Commissioner Swafford.
Well, I think obviously probably each of us will be left out at that point in time, being, if we stay at 4 for long enough, that's going to be a different feeling. I want to thank Clemson and their great fans and Florida State for having the ACC in it for the first 3 years. So we've been fortunate in that respect. And to a degree, I think as a conference, that takes some of the pressure off, for the future to have been a part of the first 3 years. But obviously you'd feel different. And one of the, I'm not advocating an 18 playoff, but one of the positives of that, and there are many negatives, would be that in all probability each of the 5 power conferences, their champion would be in all likelihood. But beyond that, I think the 4 is the right number right now, as I said earlier, and I think we all have to accept and trust the system that has been set up to choose the 4 best teams. I'm like Bill, I think they have gotten that correct the first 3 years, and hopefully we'll continue to do so. But fans are very passionate about their team, and I understand that. That's part of what makes college football the great game. It's the passion of the fans, and if you're 5th, or as Greg was saying, if you're 9th, if there were 8, there would be a pretty empty if you didn't get in, because you're going to feel you're not objective. Fans, by definition, are not objective. Thank God they're not. I'm just glad the first 3 years the Atlantic Coast Conference has a good feeling in terms of having it.
A number of coaches, so all 3 of you have commented that because of the playoff there's so much attention, and obviously we're all here, but the question is, does it lessen the other bowl games? It's an age-old conversation, and all bowls, particularly all conferences, especially the ACC and the SEC, have very long-standing and firm relationships. But starting with you, Commissioner Sankey, What is the overall health of what we see Monday night?
I have now been to 9 football games in the last week and a half, and I did the same thing last year. And you're always going to have different attendance patterns around bowl games, and that's just a reality. You're going to send people geographically farther away from campus or from their fan base. But I think those were healthy experiences. So take the conversations I had with Jeff Long, Brett Bielema before the Belt Bowl, and the week they had in Charlotte, which is a new bowl for us. The ACC's obviously been a part of all that experience, and young people had experiences that they've not shared before. I heard actually